The following is a production of UNO Television for KYNE TV. Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. Consider this. Violent crime in this country, even in the city of Omaha, is down a bit. So might we assume that domestic violence is also down? Well, we'll ask some of the experts around here. Mary Larson is the the director of the YWCA Women Against Violence program. You've seen her. She's been doing this for a long time and is very familiar with the local scene. Also with us today is Brenda Beadle. She is supervisor of the Domestic Violence Unit for the Douglas County Attorney's Office. She serves as a deputy county attorney. And also we're glad to have Sergeant Charles, we call him Charlie Venditti, here today. And he's heads up the OPD Domestic Violence Investigation Unit. I'm going to start with you, Charlie. You were telling me on the phone that you should see what it's like here on a Monday morning.
Yeah,
Is that sort of when you face it, there is domestic violence in this community?
Typically when we come in on a Monday morning, we're probably looking on average of 50 cases that happen over the weekend of misdemeanor assaults. We may have, depending, 2, 3, maybe more sometimes, of felony assaults, more serious injuries to domestic violence victims.
Okay, now if he comes in Monday morning and his team sees 50 assaults, what is that indicative of all the domestic assaults and violence that happen in the city?
Well, I think that because people are together more often on the weekend, you're going to see a greater incidence of that happening. And you have a 3-day weekend, you see much greater. I know that our intervention advocates are much busier from Thursday night up through Sunday night than they would be during the middle of the week. And so that gives you a pretty good indication that when you have people in close quarters, very often that's an opportune time for abuse to take place.
Well, the thing I was asking was, I don't know what's the standing statistic now as to every call to the police or a complaint represents only a small percentage, because the minority of domestic violence incidents are reported, right?
Well, in the beginning you talked a little bit about how there's been a decrease even here. Our hotline has seen a 21% increase though, 21% increase over 1997. And predominantly that would be domestic violence calls by victims, by family friends, by even the perpetrator. And I don't think that means there's more domestic violence happening, but I think that people are recognizing that there are services available and that things have been changed in our community, and that people are going to respond differently than they might have a year ago, and in particular 5 years ago.
Well, we saw that happen with rape, didn't we? Many years ago, the rapes were not reported as much, and then we saw a spike in the statistics for a while, and the common wisdom is that yes, the reporting, people are reporting it, law enforcement, emergency rooms, everybody's getting a lot better at handling it. People aren't as afraid. The attorneys, the prosecutors, more sensitive. Is that the kind of thing we're seeing with domestic violence?
Well, I think to some extent that people still reach out for help from a social service agency where they might not call the police. And in particular, maybe people in higher economic groups where domestic violence is taking place, but you don't want the cruiser to come to your neighborhood. And so you might call a hotline or even call a shelter and to find out what other resources are out there if you're not aware or you don't have access to a check or a second home or something along those lines. But in talking to people just even here recently, that many times the courts and law enforcement may not see the full spectrum of domestic violence because of socioeconomic groups. I mean, you don't probably arrest the same percentage of attorneys that you would blue-collar workers. And again, it has to do with people trying to still keep the issue behind closed doors within the walls of their home as compared to you know, in certain neighborhoods you can hear what's going on next door versus it's not the same thing in certain parts of our community.
Brenda, how long have you been involved specifically with domestic violence? I know that's not the only thing you do, but
When did your unit start
March
up?
of '97.
So we followed shortly after they started their unit up, so over a year, about a year and a half now.
did that mark the fact that these kinds of things were happening at once? And we'll talk about the coordinating council that was formed too. Did that mark an extra commitment on the part of local officials,
Oh, yeah.
police, the county attorney?
Absolutely.
Most definitely. I know with Omaha Police, we were forming the unit, which had never been there before, and victims before were being advised to follow a certain procedure that they had to take upon themselves in order to see that the suspect would be arrested. And in '97, when we started the unit, we began getting the warrants for the victim. And at that time, Brenda's unit was then formed, and we formed a group of all the different agencies within the city, mainly the county attorney, the YWCA advocates, Omaha Police, probation, parole, and began to meet on a regular basis. And that was all new to the city of Omaha. That was never done before.
Well, let me ask this. We had and I hate to say a rash, I mean a fatal cases this fall, which brought it to the forefront again. And news people are notorious for paying attention to things when someone dies, when these kinds of things and potentially deadly situations are going on all the time. And I know that's always kind of irksome, but on the other hand, it does call attention to it. These kinds of things, we keep getting a sense that, you know, things are getting better. You mentioned maybe there's not more domestic violence, but more reporting. But if you had to paint a picture of, you know, someone just came up the street or the subject came up and each one of you said, well, this is the thing that bothers me the most, or this is a thing that grabs my gut the most about 1998 going into 1999 in Omaha, Nebraska. What would you say?
As far as the problems?
Yeah.
The children, those kind of cases bother me the most, when the children watch as the beatings occur or the stabbings occur, because we're going to see them in the future. They're going to be part of the system with us again, and I think we're starting to focus now that we're kind of up and running for more than a year. I think that all the different agencies are starting to focus more on how we can deal with this as a family instead of just maybe the two individuals. It started to involve, it's really involving the whole family and the children, and that's kind of what grabs my gut the most.
Charlie, when you...
Likewise, yeah, that's probably the most difficult. In some of the homicides we had this past year, there were children present when the homicides occurred. I mean, it's bad enough for the mother and the wife just to have that happen, but when the kids are there, that's as all police officers, and they feel the same way. It just tears at you.
Mary, what grabs you?
Well, besides the children being affected, I think that it affects the community, and I think also that it affects the people who work with this. I know that it's really hard, and I've sat at meetings, for example, where prosecutors and law enforcement officers are working on a case, a serious case, and I think the most recently where the young woman was stomped in the head and is still not doing very well, and the effects that it has on those people. And they take all these things to heart, and I think once our community will start doing that, they recognize that this is serious, that people can die, that hopefully that we'll all work together, every individual, so that we can even limit the violence in our community, and so that we don't end up having deaths. And that's how I look at it. I hope these people did not die in vain, that we've learned something from what has happened, and we can go on to make our community safer for everyone.
When we think of domestic violence, you've mentioned the children. I think the standard thinking is spouse or long-time live-in. It runs the whole gamut, doesn't it? To just boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. I mean, officers go out. I hear domestic calls. They call them, you know, it's a domestic situation, but those don't just mean the typical husband and wife and 1.9 children in the statistics?
Well, typically on a monthly average, we see around, depending on the month, warmer months we get more, but I think our highest figure was 550 cases for the month of June in '98. And
But there are all kinds of
but it's
relationships.
the whole gambit. I mean, boyfriend, girlfriend, same-sex relationships we handle, husbands and wives that have been married for 30 years. So it covers the whole gambit. It covers all parts of the city. There's no one area of the city that has more than others. It may be reported more in some areas of the city, like Mary mentioned, that I think in the more affluent areas it's less likely to be reported, and we know what's going on out there.
What's the biggest myth you fight in dealing with this, in terms of myth or stereotype, or when, you know, those kind of walls you go up and said, I thought we stopped thinking like that, or I thought, you know, we had at least crossed that hurdle? What?
I'll jump in on that one because I see it all the time in dealing with defense attorneys, dealing with judges, dealing with juries. I think one of the most frustrating views is why is the government, why is the state getting involved? She's an adult, she can leave if he's beating her. You know, why does she stay in that relationship? And that's something that probably Mary can hit on a little bit better in understanding that, but that's something that, again, it's educating and training and educating the public about, you know, the cycle and the problems.
Particularly, I suppose, with regard to letting the abuser off the hook, thinking, hey, she knows now, we all know now, if she doesn't like it, she can leave. Pack up the kids and go.
Well, and I think the common one of the most frustrating perceptions I think out there is, why are we even involved? You know, this is a family thing. This is between them. It's between, you know, they treat, let's say, a sexual assault. Their view of it should be treated differently, perhaps, if it's stranger as opposed to husband, wife, or girlfriend and boyfriend. If he forced her to have sexual relations, well, once they find out that they're boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife, that gives them a whole different outlook on it. Oh, that's they're a couple. This is their problem. Don't bring it out into the public. It's different, and everybody has that perception, I think, or a lot of people have that perception.
When people see that there are millions of dollars being spent on medical care, millions of dollars lost in the workplace every year because of absenteeism, lack of productivity, when you see the problems that the kids have and how they end up getting involved back in the criminal justice system, not only as perpetrators of domestic violence, but they end up being people who have a higher percentage of raping other individuals. They have percentages of getting involved in drugs and alcohol problem. So if we really want to look at this not just as two adults and they know how to take care of themselves and one should just leave, we've missed a whole gamut of problems that our society needs to be concerned with.
So even if people don't feel it in here, you can reach down in their pocketbook and show how it's going to, it's the pay now or pay later.
Well, I think
scenario.
I would say one study said 40 to 60% of all police calls related to domestic violence. So if we didn't have domestic violence in our country, just think of how many other types of calls they would actually be able to go on and focus in on. You look at that alone just from law enforcement's perspective. You look at it from the perspective of how many cases are caught up in the criminal justice system. Now, you know, it's important to do that because down the road, if we don't deal with it here and now, we're going to have murders. We're going to have problems with those kids who witnessed the domestic violence. And I think once our society asks the question, why does he abuse, instead of why doesn't she just leave, we will have made a huge headway.
We'll get back to that. Charlie, what roadblocks have you run into? Maybe it's getting better, maybe it was worse before, but what are the things that you just want to pound on that desk?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that it's gotten better as far as being reported and the way they're investigated and the way they're prosecuted and the help they get from advocates, no doubt. But the biggest obstacle, I believe, in our area is education of our judicial system, the judges. And I think we have everybody on board in our community now, except for the judges, that have gone to training seminars and realize how big a problem it really is, except for the judicial end of it. So and not to say that there's not some good judges, because we do. We have some very good ones that are on board with us. But we have some that I feel do not believe in what we're doing. And until we get the judges on board, it's going to be open-ended, and we need to close that door.
Well, when you talk about the judges, do you mean in how they sentence and how they, and sentence isn't always the right word, how they deal with the perpetrator in terms of laying out a course of action, maybe therapy? I mean, I really don't know. I've never sat in on.
I'm thinking of toward the lines of mandatory counseling, and perhaps the sentencing definitely needs to be looked at.
And I think just in general, their whole perspective.
Just their whole perspective on the elements.
Because that's going to affect their sentencing. For instance, I can tell you a number of times we've run into cases where if it's an assault and she's beat up and we come to court and the judge will listen to the history, and there may be a ton of history between them, and there may be assaults that just happened a month ago, and we give them all this history and we tell them about what's going on, and they nod, and then they say $100 fine. A fine doesn't do anything to the problem. They're going to go home and they're going to do this again. It's only $100. That's what you pay when you get caught with marijuana in your pocket. So it's a $100 fine and that's it.
Wait a minute. There's still $100 fines for
Absolutely.
Is all, and you walk out the door?
Absolutely. It happens every day.
There's no, hey, maybe you ought to go to an anger management class, or.
And again, like Sergeant Venditti indicated, there are great judges that are, understand the cycle, understand the issues of domestic violence, and that would never happen in their courtroom, but happens every day. Every day, someone could come in and get sentenced with a fine.
I would compare that to a police officer or a person working in a hospital or an attorney that's prosecuting the case. If their heart really isn't in to what they're doing, they're not going to treat it that serious.
Well, and I'm sure there are police officers, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure, I mean, social service agencies, they probably wouldn't be there, but I'm sure there are even attorneys in the prosecutorial side that say, I just.
Why don't you just leave? Why are you staying?
Right.
And that.
Absolutely. That happens all the
goes
time.
on.
And that's where the education and the training, and as long as you're willing to be open to that, which that's some of our problem is some people aren't willing to even go that route and get educated and get the training because they're so they so firmly believe that this shouldn't be in the courts.
I guess my gut feeling is if people that are doing this, who are generally, putting judges and officers and other people that are fairly well educated, that are exposed to it, the really seamy side of it, the really ugly, the really hurtful side, and if they don't have some sensitivity to what it takes to derail some of this, then I'm not trying to insult the general public, but imagine then, because they should be aware, they should be leading the way. So that troubles you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's why our units have been formed, and that's why it has gotten so much better, because now with the training we provide for police officers, there's mandatory training for our officers. For the county attorneys, they go through training. Advocates obviously do. Mm-hmm. But do judges. And
I don't think they have mandatory training for anything, do they? Once you're a judge?
I don't know. I can speak for other states. I know in Minnesota there is. It's been legislated that they will receive domestic violence training. But it's very difficult to tell a judge that he or she needs training in a specific area. But I think, as in any other trend, it takes a while for things to come to the Midwest, and Minnesota had to legislate it. They now have it going for mandatory training for judges in domestic violence. So I just think it's a matter of time before it catches on here. Those judges that are on board with us, I feel will continue to pave the way for the judges that aren't on board yet.
The formation of the coordinating council that ties in the advocates, the social service end, the county attorney, the police, has that carried some weight now? I mean, the fact that sort of certain people are on the same page, and not that you were ever fighting each other, but it's like now all of us speak with kind of one voice in the community. Will that ultimately have an effect on the judges? Has it had an effect on other agencies that come in touch with that?
I think so.
Yeah.
I know right now there's information being exchanged with another state and Nebraska, and there's a representative from the judicial system in this other state that provides training for the judges in that area that is willing to take part in training in Omaha. So,
Are the counties talking, let's say the metro, because if you've had trouble in Douglas County, maybe, you know, I mean, it's not that hard to move to Sarpy County.
Well, Sarpy County has a community response team too, and we have some liaisons from that particular response team working with our coordinating council. And when the Omaha Police Department did extensive training for all the cruiser officers, they included the surrounding area. So we had Douglas County Sheriffs, we had people from Bellevue, Papillion, Fremont, Ralston. So everybody came and received the similar training, and they are following similar procedures. And so we work very closely with that, with those individuals, and try to make sure that there's continuity within the two-county area in particular.
You know, in the past few years, the state has made it easier through legislation to get restraining orders. Do restraining orders work? I mean, are the tools for a woman and or the abused man, are the tools that we've been putting in place slowly, like restraining order, does that work? Some people feel they're worthless. People have called the newsroom and said, I have this piece of paper and it's worthless.
We did a survey, and majority of people felt it was very worthwhile. Even people where there were violations, because when they had a violation, they called the police and the person was arrested. And that makes a big difference. That's very empowering to have the police respond, to have a person arrested when this person has been told by a judge you're supposed to stay clear of this other individual. So it's been very effective, even when there's been violations. There are some people who are not going to be deterred by that. They're not going to listen to anybody in the criminal justice system. And that tends to be times when sometimes people end up getting killed, and those people get, you know, they usually play on the issue that we got this protection order and see this person is dead.
But it takes the onus, the officer then doesn't have to sit around and ask questions and do an
Exactly.
investigation. I mean, it's got to be good news for the officer.
I think so. Now we have a mandatory
Where there's
arrest
not a
policy.
judgment call here,
Exactly.
you know.
Right.
If the officer arrives and he finds out there is a protection order and the person is there in violation, it's mandatory arrest.
And are they pretty easy to get? I mean, do you,
Very.
there's an attorney, or you can...
Well, we have legal advocates at the Protection Order Office 5 days a week, and the Victim Assistance Unit provides assistance as well. And people can walk through that process. It takes about an hour and a half because there's about 8 pages worth of paperwork. But once that point is on, you know.
But of legal
it's,
processes in
I
this
believe
world,
it's
it is
cost-free,
probably...
too, right,
yeah,
ma'am?
there's no cost to it.
It's probably one of the easiest ones.
It's one of the easiest, and one of the things that all advocates stress with people is the importance of it, and the importance of the responsibility of the petitioner, who's the person taking out the protection order, because they have some responsibilities to it as well, because this is a serious step. We just don't want to do this to try to scare somebody or, you know, to show them that you mean business. You want an end to the relationship, and so those are some of the things that advocates always stress with that individual too, and see what other services they might need. A person might come in for a protection order, and when they recognize what it can and cannot do, because there are limitations, they'll be given a breadth of other options for them that they might want to look into, from shelter to counseling to
And that's
others.
empowering too.
Exactly.
To know what's out there.
And I think, Carol, part of the, you indicated you used to get calls that this is just a piece of paper and it doesn't work, and hopefully that perception is changing, because there have been a great deal of change in the last year and a half with the domestic violence police unit and the prosecution unit being formed, where the victim takes less of a role and the state takes more of a role. The victim doesn't have to come down and do the paperwork themselves. In a protection order, they have to go down and get the protection order issued, but it is a mandatory arrest, so they're not going to be questioned about their version of what happened and the other person's version of what happened.
And the old, it's your fault that I'm,
Exactly.
you know, and it's your fault, and if it weren't for you, that, you know, I mean, it takes some of the onus off the person that's been battered.
That's right.
That's right. And also, as of, I think it was July of this year, the penalties can be enhanced now for those where it used to be up to a year in jail. If it's the second time you violated that same protection order, now it's a Class 4 felony. That's going to grab the attention of those people who think that it's not a big deal to go over to the house when I was told by the judge not to.
Now, does a Class 4 felony have standard punishments or consequences,
Well,
so that
sure.
so that these judges that you might worry about have less latitude?
Well,
or-
actually, it's still a range. It's 0 to 5 years in the penitentiary.
Oh.
That's a little more significant, though, than a Class 1 misdemeanor. And if you're a convicted felon and you have that felony on your record, that takes away a lot of your civil rights. So it's obviously going to get the attention of the person. It's easier to prosecute for us, compared to as if we had a assault and battery where it's his word against hers, or there weren't as much injury or something like that. Where we have a protection order, it's valid. We have to show that it's valid. That's easy. And the police officer says, when I got there, the perpetrator was there, period. That's it. You're not supposed to be there. That's an easy case to prove. So we're going to have a lot higher success with that kind of case as well. So, I think given the changes that's occurred in the system, in every unit and every agency, these cases, these protection orders are going to be a lot more empowering.
Okay, assuming then that our community really believes or comes around to fairly universally believing that there is a domestic violence problem and that we all need to be on board to maybe just open the door a little so that even the perpetrator doesn't feel, yes, they should feel stigmatized, but that it's okay to go to get help. I mean, this is a process. What if you had a wish list, and it's almost Christmas time, and for something to happen either legislatively or whatever, not going to be total peace on earth tomorrow, but what would you want, real quickly?
Well, I think probably the mandating of judicial training would be real beneficial, because I think that many times people don't, when the opportunities are there, they don't seek it. And for those individuals who can learn from individuals from other communities and the importance of this in the judicial process, I think that would be beneficial.
Brenda?
And that was exactly my wish. You have the police working their tails off and doing a good job. You have the social service agencies doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the prosecutors going to trial and getting the case ready. And it's all for naught if you can't get the judge to understand the cycle and understand where you're coming from. So that's my wish as well.
Okay, other than that, Charlie,
A curriculum set up in local high schools to educate students that you treat others with love and affection. If you're going to date somebody, you don't deserve to be hit or slapped or put down if they disagree with you. And I think it's very important for children in our community to learn that, because I do believe that domestic violence is a learned behavior.
and if you do feel angry or you do want to hit, that it's okay and not that abnormal to go to get some help.
And advise them where they can go for help.
Well, I want to thank some people that helped us, the poinsettias on the set that remind us of the holiday season. We're courtesy the Rose Court at Eagle Run Square, 129th and Maple. We want to thank them, and of course we want to thank you. This is a serious subject for this time of the year, but we're hoping for a better new year. Mary Larson, Brenda Beadle, Charlie Venditti, thank you for joining us very much on Consider This. Have a great holiday season.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health,